really fortunate to have Ellen here today to introduce us to the TAD technique. So please join me in welcoming Ellen Tad to Connecting for Change.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to share my perspective. When I was young, I was very sensitive and very concerned about the suffering that I saw in the world around me and in my own family. I grew up with a mother who had a severe case of MS and who suffered tremendously. 2 years after she died, she came back and talked to me. This was a watershed event for me. My mother gave me birth, and my mother gave me rebirth. She explained that I should not mourn for her, for she chose a difficult life to learn compassion for those who suffer. I stopped seeing the world as simply a human experience. I started to see that all of us are spirit temporarily on the earth. And then I had innumerable experiences. I discovered that I had an ability to connect to the spiritual world, and that I had a clairvoyance and a clairaudience. And when I discovered this, I thought, well, how am I going to use this ability? Very much like someone who discovers they have an artistic talent or a music talent. How did I want to use it? I became interested in conversing with beings in the spiritual world who knew more than I did. I wasn't interested in giving messages. I was interested in receiving an understanding of life. And I started watching people. I started watching people with the added depth of perception of clairvoyance, because I wanted to understand who we are, why we're here, what are we here to learn? What are we here to contribute? And I started looking at the chakra system because I found that the chakra system was a wonderful way to assess someone's strengths and weaknesses very quickly. And I found also that as a culture, we tend to perceive and make decisions intellectually and emotionally. And I found that there's another option, and that other option is wisdom. I was raised by my father, who was a theoretical physicist, and I learned very early that you can be brilliant but not wise, and that we have a culture that emphasizes the development of the intellect and not enough focus on wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to see the far-reaching impact, and we can have wonderful intentions and make terrible decisions that impact all of us. I always think of one decision as a pebble in a pond that keeps rippling. How often do people look back at their lives and know they had good intentions, but nevertheless made poor choices? So I'm very passionate about teaching perception, because I find that perception informs feeling, and feeling informs action. And if our perceptions are skewed, then our feelings are going to be confused. And most people's perceptions are influenced by the culture in which they live. And as I started having these spiritual experiences with beings who weren't on the earth, I started experiencing a more universal perspective. So I started teaching and experimenting with a technique that now people are calling the TAD technique, and it's the relationship between experiencing from the solar plexus, the gut, which is the center of emotion, feeling, and intuition, and the third eye in the middle of the forehead. The third eye is the center of focus and concentration, wisdom, clarity, discernment. And I'd like to teach all of you this exercise because experiential knowing is so much more powerful than intellectual understanding. And if you feel it, you may want to practice. And I have found with my own life and with my students that this change of perception is a pivot away and it can change everything. I love quoting my son. When he was in high school, he said, "Living life in the solar plexus is experiencing the human condition from the human perspective, and it's a tragedy. Living life in the third eye is experiencing the human condition from the spiritual perspective, and it's really interesting." And that's what I've found. So I have not a lot of time today, so I have a lot of things that I'd like to share. There's my timekeeper keeping me on track. So I'm going to dive into this exercise so you can experience it for yourself, okay? So I'd like you all to close your eyes and put your palms down and focus your attention in the gut. Now, a lot of people live their life focused here consciously or unconsciously without realizing the impact that it has. So close your eyes, focus in the solar plexus, the area where you feel butterflies when you're nervous, and I'd like you to imagine yourself late for an important appointment, an appointment that really is important to you, and you're late. Be aware of what you feel, focused in the solar plexus, and how do you want to deal with being late? And now when you're ready, turn your palms up. Probably doesn't take very long for you to have a response. Turn your palms over. If you haven't turned your palms over, please do so. And now tap the point in the middle of your forehead. This point is not between the brows. It's right smack in the middle of the forehead. I want you to tap that point. Sometimes I tell people, put a little spit there, just to create a sensation so you know where you're aiming. Now, like an elevator, bring your focus up to that point and gently pressure your focus out of your forehead. As you look out of your forehead, I'd like you to hold your focus. You can put your finger down. I want you to look out of your forehead. The finger was just to help you find that point. Envision a round window. Keep your focus up, and imagine yourself late for an important appointment. But this time you're looking out of the middle of your forehead. Hold your focus. Don't let it drop. Be aware of the difference in your perception, in your feeling. How do you deal with being late? And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay, now since I can't talk to all of you about what happened, if you noticed a difference, clap your hands. If being in the third eye was a more positive perspective, clap your hands. We have a choice. How do we want to focus as we move through our life? When I gave birth to my daughter, I studied Lamaze, which taught me to focus on a point. And I remember focusing on the top of a pine tree outside my window. And when I held my focus, I rode the contractions and I wasn't overwhelmed by them. When I lost my focus, I was overwhelmed by the process of giving birth and the physical pain. The more that we focus, the more we ride life. The more that we focus, we maintain an objectivity, an ability to make good decisions. Let's try with eyes opened, because I want you to practice with your eyes opened. It's really how we live day to day. Now, we are a solar plexus dominant culture, and what that means is we have a tendency to react when we don't get what we want. Reaction from the solar plexus can be anger, sadness, grief. All addiction comes from solar plexus imbalance. Whether it's eating too much or drugs or shopping too much, when we live here, we feel longing. When we live here, we feel wholeness and not needy. And so many of our problems in our world come from reactions and imbalance. I always say we have two big jobs here. We have our little work, which is the evolution of our own consciousness, and we have our big work, which is our contribution to others. We have to do both. You can't just focus on making the world a better place if we don't work on our own evolution and growth and clarity of perception. Some people say, follow your heart. What I've learned through observing clairvoyantly is the heart is a radiator, not a discriminator. The heart should feel love, emanate love, but the third eye is the discerning center. So the third eye informs the heart. I know many people who feel love, but don't take that love into appropriate action. You've got to unite the third eye with the heart in order to know how to be appropriately loving. So let's try with eyes open before my timekeeper tells me I'm done. So focus in the solar plexus and just look around the room at all the people here from the gut. And be aware of what you feel about yourself, about others, about the auditorium. Here we all are together. We're human. I always like to visualize the fact that everyone hugs their pillow. Okay. Now, find a point. The way to activate the third eye with eyes open is focus and concentration. People do it all the time, but what I'm trying to do is help people become aware of the mechanism so you can will it instead of hoping that it happens. Whenever you're deeply focused, you have activated the third eye, whether it's playing an instrument, playing ping pong or darts. There are many activities that activate the third eye. So one way is to stare at a point, the corner of that sign. There are a number of points, the corner of the butterfly. Focus on a point, really focus. And when you feel focused, and it feels very much like looking out of three eyes, two physical eyes and an eye in the middle of your forehead. Now look around the room out of three eyes. And pay attention. Do your perceptions change? Do your feelings change? Is the quality of your experience different? Same room. How we focus impacts how we perceive. How we perceive impacts how we feel. One of the things I love about the third eye is when we start living there, we don't conform and we don't rebel. We stay true to ourselves. It's one of the simplest and most profound tools that I know. Focus and concentration is equal to power. So I hope that this little exercise inspires you to practice, to pay attention. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is stare at a point, and I prioritize my day. We have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of energy, and a limited amount of resources. We need to be wise in how we make our choices for ourselves, for each other, and for future generations. Thank you.